Good afternoon, Steelers Nation. Week 2, time to talk Steelers-Broncos. Another road game on the horizon, but Pittsburgh 2.5 point favorite in this one. So y'all know the deal at this point. We will do a brief injury recap, some schematic stuff that we saw from both these teams in Week 1, and then some important matchups to kind of watch for, and much, much more. But just before we get going, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. And also, just in case you missed it, I did a nearly hour-long film room on Justin Fields' performance last week, covers every single drop back, as well as just some takeaways from our first real regular season look at Arthur Smith's offense. I'll link that in the description of this video. Just if you're interested in more content, become a member to the channel, and that's a way that you can pass the time until kickoff. So let's kind of talk through some injuries from the Broncos' perspective. They're really healthy. Devon Vele, who led the team in receptions last week, he was a late round draft pick. He's out. But other than that, Garrett Bowles, their left tackle, is a little bit banged up, but it seems like he's going to play. For the Steelers, Isaac Seumalo still out as expected. Spencer Anderson, I thought last week was a little bit rocky at times, especially in pass protection. But that's kind of expected, when you're a seventh round draft pick making your first career start, especially going up against Grady Jarrett. But I thought that, overall, one of the things I wrote about this week, Arthur Smith did a really good job protecting the offensive line and pass protection. Only 10 true drop back sets last week for them. So I think the scheme kind of helped alleviate some of those concerns, and I'm sure that they'll probably lean into some of those things this week and moving forward, at least until they get back to kind of full health. Roman Wilson and Russell Wilson, both questionable. I think that for Russ, I think we all kind of expect that he's probably going to be the emergency quarterback again. He said this week he's feeling better, but still not able to kind of do everything. And we kind of saw what that meant. Like last week, Kirk Cousins couldn't do or wasn't comfortable, or they didn't feel comfortable enough calling it. Some of the bootleg rollouts just didn't have the mobility. We saw how the Steelers kind of teed off on that with Russ. His play style kind of requires that he has that mobility. It's a big part of his game, and it just feels like he's not quite there yet. So probably at least another week, maybe two. Some people are talking about now until he's ready to go. Roman Wilson's interesting because I think you look at the production or lack thereof, I guess, from a receiving perspective last week, aside from George Pickens, you'd love to get Wilson out there and at least have a couple designed plays for him, even if it's just, hey, can you go out there and run us a couple deep overs, deep crossers, things like that to kind of stretch the field, give you that vertical, that horizontal stretch, maybe try to get a cheap explosive playoff play action. But it's kind of tough because, if you look at some of the guys that are dressing at the receiver position right now, like Scotty Miller, he's contributing on special teams. Not only was he playing some gunner reps last week, but he also held on that uh, Chris Boswell field goal attempt, which was really good. And then, they elevated Ben Skoranek, who also a gunner. Roman's never really played special teams, even dating back to his time in Michigan. So, covering kicks and stuff, that's not necessarily something that every player comes into the league knowing how to do. But a good way to kind of find out where those guys are at with that is to get them playing time in the preseason. And unfortunately, it's just another way that he's kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, trying to play catch up. So he was a full participant later in the week, but it sounds like I don't know. I would be kind of surprised if he got a helmet, but who knows? We'll see. The other kind of big news of the week, which I haven't really got on here and talked about a lot, was that Troy Fautanu seems like he's slated to get his first career start at right tackle. It sounds like it's going to be Dan Moore at left with Broderick Jones to the bench. A lot of people are going to have takeaways from this, and I kind of get it. We talked about this a little bit during the preseason when Broderick really struggled in those first couple games, with that giant elbow brace. I just think that Broderick right now really lacks any type of capacity to generate any power to his profile, which is significant given some of the other technical struggles that he's had. And then I think Dan Moore has just been really solid. I know that a lot of people aren't going to want to hear that, but he's been really solid. Even last week, he didn't allow a single pressure. I thought he had some good moments in the run game. So it's unfortunate kind of the way that this thing is played out. Now, I will say this doesn't necessarily mean this is not a career defining thing for Broderick Jones. This could actually be, if you want to try to spin it in a positive light or try to find a silver lining, it could be hey, maybe he's able to get that elbow a little bit more ready to go. Maybe he's, healthier, sitting on the bench. I'm always a proponent though, especially if raw prospects, they need to play, they need live action game reps to really get better at their craft. So that part of it's unfortunate for me. But I will also point out that even though Dan Moore, I think, has played well through the preseason, I thought he had a pretty solid game last week. And I understand why the Steelers are making this move because they're trying to put their best guys on the field right now. They're trying to win. Having said that, I don't think that Moore has enough of a consistent track record to put together, a month, 2 months straight of quality ball to the point where they won't at least like think about pivoting back to Broderick, maybe even at left tackle. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, regardless, good tackle play is good tackle play. How they get it doesn't really necessarily matter to me. It's just kind of a very, really unique situation. But I'm extremely excited about seeing Fautanu. If you guys remember, if you all were here through the draft season, I was extremely high on him. He was my number 7 prospect coming out. Rare mobility for the position. I think he can be an asset in the run game. I'm really excited about what he could potentially do in the screen game just because of how athletic he is, how he can change directions, get out in space, target guys at the second level. Because they've been really bad in the screen game, not just through preseason, but even in week 1 last week, they're averaging like 3 yards per attempt on screen passes. So I think that maybe he could potentially help you there as well. So I'm excited to see really high film room potential, depending on how Fautanu plays this week. But just kind of some brief thoughts on Justin Fields just last week, but he started against this Denver defense last year. I think it was week 4. I actually broke that game down as well. So if you become a member to the channel, you can go check that out. It was like 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. It was one of his better performances from last year. But after watching like Fields last week, I thought the quarterback run game was a really nice element, especially like in the red zone on third down. I thought his deep ball accuracy was really impressive. Struggles in the quick game, kind of expected, whether that was like being late or not operating on time. But most importantly, he didn't turn the ball over. He only took 2 sacks. So just the reduction of those negative plays, I thought, gave him, a performance I think was good enough to win with, even though they only scored, 18 points or whatever. But I'm excited to see what it looks like, with a full week of prep and a game plan specifically tailored towards him. I think if he goes out there and he plays really well and they win and, start the season 2-0 on the road, I think he's got a good shot to hang on to this job regardless of Wilson's health. So we'll see what happens. Don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I think he did some good things. I'm excited to see how he builds on that. Just getting into like kind of Denver, just like some of my scouting notes for them. Pretty familiar with this offense just after studying Russ over the summer. Not a lot of motion. They mixed in some two-back stuff last year, some multi-tight end usage. They're very run heavy, but they did do some RPO stuff. Definitely some stuff that Sean Payton didn't necessarily do in New Orleans that much. I think you're going to expect that to be the case more so as the season goes along, just to give some easy buttons to Bo Nix. But I think he's always had some really good designs in the quick passing game, but notably in the screen game, just finding ways to get the ball to the backs in space. And they got some guys that can really catch the ball out of the backfield. And I wrote about this, I think it released this morning about Bo Nix. Like thought he had a really rough go of it last weekend, not just live, but like when I went back and watched the film, just some uncharacteristic things from him from a decision-making standpoint. You could tell he was rushing things. I think he was a little bit surprised by just the speed of the NFL secondary defenders. He made a couple throws that just like had no chance to get there. He had some really rough misses from an accuracy standpoint in the intermediate areas of the field. Even things that I thought that were like positives of his coming out of college. The pressure to sack percentage, like get the ball out quickly and on time, navigating through those things. There were some struggles there last week too. He drifted into pressure a handful of times, but it wasn't all bad. He made some plays with his legs. Mike Tomlin talked about like his added mobility is definitely something that they're gonna try to hone in on. He had a really nice scramble in the fourth quarter, and then he ran for a touchdown a couple of plays later. So we'll see what that looks like. I think 51 dropbacks for a rookie quarterback in a close game is just like, it's honestly borderline like coaching malpractice. Like I said last week with Kirk, if teams want to get into the situation where they're dropping back to pass 40 times, 45 times, I think that me and all of you guys would probably take that. If any team like feels like that they have the offensive line capacity to block the Steelers front seven with all the different pass rushers that they've got, TJ Watt, if they feel like they can do that, I welcome that for sure. So we'll see if their game plan changes a little bit. I would expect them to be more run heavy this week. This is an offense that, in my opinion, needs to run the ball well. With Javonte Williams, only a 25% rushing success rate last week against the Seahawks. They will mix in some gaps, some zone. Like I said, Peyton doesn't do a lot of motion, but he does do a good job of creating good angles in the run game with some motion and some things like that. You can expect you're going to see a lot of quick game, probably going to see a lot of stick concepts, shock, throws to the flat. 70% of, I think, Knicks' targets last week came on throws less than 10 yards down the field. I have talked about this a little bit throughout the week, but the biggest thing for me is like this team has got to tackle. like tackle better than they did last week, tackle extremely well. If they do that, I think that they've got a really good chance to win the ball game. Knicks had like 22 or 24 completions last week. They only had 68 yards after the catch. They don't really have dynamic playmakers after the catch, but being able to kind of squeeze the air out of the offense after the catch like that, because he will throw short of the sticks quite a bit. He only averaged like 6 yards of average depth per target last week, and that's kind of like what we saw at Oregon too. So we'll see what that looks like, but just kind of hitting on some of the other players on their offense. Quentin Miners is their best player, in my opinion, on offense. Size, power, physicality at the guard position. He plays right guard. He could displace guys on base blocks, rip and run in the zone run game. Excellent finisher. His right tackle, Mike McGlinchey, he's more of an impactful run blocker as well. Does have some struggles. Will give up his outside shoulder in pass protection from time to time, but he's really good, specifically on double teams. Like I mentioned, Knicks was struggled last week, but he was under pressure on 44% of his dropbacks. So I like some of the Seattle rushers that they've got over there. I think they've got some good players. Boya Mafe, one of their edge rushers, is really coming into his own. Had a really nice two-hand swipe, dip, ghost move over Garrett Bowles last week for a quick pressure. But the Steelers different type of pass rushing talent on this team. And, I think that they're really, unless Denver makes some massive adjustments, which they could, I think they're really going to struggle to keep, the Steelers pass rushers off of Knicks in this one. That's one of the reasons why I'm pretty optimistic about what this thing's going to look like. Just in terms of like Denver too, like their wide receiver room, in my opinion, is still like kind of figuring its way out. It's kind of a question mark. I like some of the complementary players that they have, but they really lack anybody that you really have to game plan around. We've talked a lot about Cortland Sutton just over the course of the offseason because he's been a frequent, name that's came up in some trade discussions, things like that. Big bodied receiver. He's excellent at the catch point. Most of his route tree does come outside the numbers, but he can cross your face, win inside. He can defeat press coverage. I would anticipate that Porter probably draws that assignment, especially when the Steelers play man coverage. The Steelers didn't play a lot of man last week. It was mostly cover three. They actually played cover three on like 57% of their snaps last week against Atlanta. Will we see a similar approach? I'm not sure. One thing that I will be like looking forward to is they only blitzed Cousins like twice last week, and partially because they were getting home regardless. They were really doing a good job of compressing the pocket with four. Knicks last week, like I said, they allowed a lot of pressure even when the Seahawks didn't blitz. I didn't think the Seahawks game plan last week against the Broncos was overly exotic. I mean, they pretty much just lined up and beat them. So I'm interested to see what the Steelers do with that, but I'd expect Porter to draw Surtain. I know that's going to be a matchup that everybody's really excited about. Over there. I like Josh Reynolds. He was a guy who I was kind of pleading for the Steelers to sign. He's like a really perfect kind of like third, fourth receiving option for your room. Thought he had some good moments last week. He caught a back shoulder fade over one of the smaller cornerbacks, and then won on a couple slants. Took a big hit over the middle for a big first down conversion. So he's a nice little player as well. But overall, I think, just from a talent perspective, I mean, the Steelers defense definitely has like the advantage pretty significantly in this. But I want to talk a little bit about the Broncos defense, which I kind of like some of the pieces they've got, man. Vance Joseph's defense started off last season on a really, really rough note. If you guys remember, I think Miami hung like 70 points on them or something like that week 3. But really, over the course of the season, they got a lot better. I think they finished over the second half of the season. I think they finished 8th in EPA per play, about like 14th or 15th in success rate. So pretty solid for a team, without a ton of star power on that side of the ball, but primarily a 3-4 base unit. Vance Joseph's been around a long time. He loves to blitz. So they were top 5 in blitz rate last season. They blitzed a lot last week against Geno Smith. What was really interesting to me is that as I was combing through the film, they played nearly 70% man coverage last week against Seattle. And I think, Geno historically has played good against man coverage, but Seattle's also got some weapons. They got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. So the fact that they were willing to go toe-to-toe with those guys was pretty telling to me. But, last year when they saw Justin Fields, it was kind of the inverse of that. They played mostly too high. They only blitzed him 3 times. Played a ton of zone. They only played man coverage on like 20-something% of the snaps, I think, like that. But I think that approach is probably, a kind of a wait and see game. Geno against man coverage, they brought some pressure. He broke a 30-something yard run, and he's not necessarily a scrambler. So if the Broncos want to play man coverage, like there could be definitely some potential for Justin to break one of those explosive runs. We've kind of been waiting to see. So we'll see what that looks like. Their lone star on defense is Pat Surtain, arguably the best quarterback in the game. Surtain is like, I pretty much like refer to him as like the build a corner. He has the size, he has the speed, the physicality. He's super technically refined. He can play in press, he can play off coverage, he can pedal. He's very patient, does a great job keeping his shoulders square to the wide receivers, just never panicked, always in phase. Him and DK Metcalf, he followed him around pretty much throughout the game last week. Metcalf had a couple catches underneath, nothing over the top. Sertan picked up a couple ticky tack penalties, in my opinion, but we'll see. I expect that's going to be a George Pickens matchup this weekend. This is going to be a great barometer. I'm pretty high on George Pickens, man. I know I've said it throughout the summer. I'll continue to say it, but I think that we've still yet to see the best version of GP. And I think with better quarterback play and hopefully an offense that it's going to allow him to do more things and just run back shoulder fades, I'm optimistic about what this is going to look like. And I'm excited to see what that matchup is. I think it's going to be great content for Film Room. I'm excited to watch it. But I would anticipate, you still got to throw the ball to Pickens. Like that's the thing. Like they're gonna have to. He's really their lone, like truly dynamic player, in my opinion, on offense. So you've got to find ways to get him involved. Maybe utilize some stacks, some bunches to get him some free releases, or maybe get him away from Sertan on a couple of plays if he's not winning those one-on-ones. But I'm interested to see what happens. I think it's gonna be a great matchup. So, I mentioned they played a ton of zone coverage man coverage last week. The Broncos did. It's going to open up some opportunities for some other guys. Like Riley Moss is like a first-year starter across from Surtain. He actually played Tyler Lockett pretty good last week. I thought a lot of Lockett's catches were like really tough, like back shoulder fades, winning 50-50 balls, things like that. But he did get beat on a double move that didn't necessarily get targeted. So I'm curious if the Steelers maybe come back to that. So we'll see. That's kind of a little interesting nugget that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. But can any of the Steelers wide receivers step up? Like that's the thing. Like we didn't see much production from them last week. I would like to see a little bit more Ben Skoranek on offense. Like even if it's not necessarily to help the receiving production, I thought the blocking from the receiver position last week was one of the worst parts of their offense. I thought Van Jefferson, he got blown up like 3 times in the first quarter of the game. The guy he was designated to block made a tackle or hit the ball carrier in the backfield. So we'll see what that looks like. Like I said, I don't think we're going to see Roman Wilson. I mean, maybe could they use one of these speedy guys, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, maybe to take a shot over the top, try to create some explosive plays. But we'll see what that looks like. But like I said, I like some of the pieces that Denver's got on defense, even without a lot of star power. This isn't like one of the worst defenses in the league. Like this is going to be probably a slightly below average defense or something like that. Maybe the 20th best defense in the league by the end of the year. So it's not going to be a pushover by any means, especially since they're going to be at home. But they have some interesting pass rushers that I really like. Jonathan Cooper, former 7th-round pick. He had a monster game last week. 7 pressures, 2 sacks, big speed to power guy. Like I said, he was really good on film last week. And then on the other side, they've got Nick Bonito, a guy that I liked a decent amount coming out of Oklahoma. He's a guy, speed rusher, incredible bend. He can run under a table at full speed. Baron Browning's kind of another guy on that kind of same speed, finesse type of role. And then Zach Allen, like they paid him to come over, I think from Arizona, excuse me. A quick penetrating 3 tech. He has great footwork, can set up his moves, a lot of Euro steps, rip moves under offensive linemen. But you can run at these guys. Like that's the big thing too. Like the Steelers are going to be really run heavy. They're going to run the ball on a ton of first downs. I think you saw that last week. You've seen that really through Arthur Smith's career and how he wants to structure his offensive game plan. You can run at these guys because they're all kind of like a little bit undersized. So they brought in some other guys from other places to kind of shore up the spine of this defense. Brandon Jones comes over from Miami. He's a decent, complimentary player at safety. And then Cody Barton, who's played some different stops. I remember him mostly from his Seattle days a couple years ago. But Alex Singleton is their other backer. I think he's a little bit of a liability in coverage, in my opinion. In 2023, the Broncos allowed over 1,000 yards, so 1,091 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns to tight ends. So we're looking for guys to step up, especially if you get some man coverage on third down, or you need some guys to win one-on-ones. Could this be a Pat Freiermuth game? I think that's definitely a valid question. Pat was relatively quiet last week. We saw a lot of 12, 13 personnel, so it wasn't like he wasn't on the field, but they just didn't necessarily, get him the football a ton. Maybe that changes this week, especially depending on how Denver elects to play them from a coverage perspective. But, those, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, that was most in the NFL, among defenses last year. So, definitely some potential for a big Freiermuth game. So, but this is a game, like, just kinda put a bow on things, wrap things up. This is a game that I expect the Steelers to win. I think you're gonna see a pretty similar offensive approach, but I hope a little bit less of a vanilla game plan. I mean, they ran several of the same plays like over and over and over last week, which I think is fine given the circumstances that they were operating within. But I'm interested to see how this offense is going to continually evolve throughout the season. I actually thought that Art did some good things in the run game too. So we'll see. I thought that the Steelers' run game had some flashes. I know the overall numbers from a yards per carry standpoint didn't necessarily look great, but they did some creative things in terms of they did some counter stuff, some gap stuff, not just strictly wide zone, which is something we've talked a lot about. Art kind of needing to diversify a little bit more. But I think, like I said, I think I like the Broncos defense a little bit more than I think most of the Steelers fan base does on Twitter, it seems like. But I think the talent discrepancy, looking at the Steelers offense or defense, excuse me, versus their offense is just so vast in this game that they really should and hopefully win. Like, this is a game that, in my opinion, they should win by probably multiple scores. But we'll see what happens. I mean, it's on the road. You never know. NFL is a week-to-week week. I think Bo Nix is better than he played last week. We will see, even though I wasn't too crazy about him as a prospect. Better days are ahead for him than what he put on film last week. So we'll see. But starting 2-0, on the road, getting yourself a little breathing room while the rest of the AFC North kind of gains their footing would be pretty massive. Man, they were the only AFC North team to win a game last week, so that's pretty huge. But I appreciate you guys watching. As always, drop me those score predictions. You see the Steelers win it? Will it be close? Will it not be? Or maybe even if you think that they're not going to be able to pull this one out, let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out the channel sponsor Homage if you're looking for your Steelers gear. I just caught me a couple new T-shirts for my trip to Indy here in a couple weeks, but I will be back as always to recap the game, give you guys my takeaways. Hopefully another win for the Steelers. Good vibes heading into week 3's home opener. I think against the Chargers next week. But enjoy your weekend. Peace and love, everybody.